Yes, but the USA is not just offensively hacking countries. It is involved in full-spectrum surveillance, as revealed by Edward Snowden, arguably making accusations against Chinese companies like Huawei even more risible. Joining me now via Skype from the British colony of Bermuda is Guinness World Record holder Jim Rogers. He founded the Quantum Fund with George Soros and is the author of A Bull in China, Investing Profitably in the World's Greatest Market. Jim, welcome to Going Underground. So you've said Trump is making China great again. Do you think some Chinese Communist Party officials are laughing at the latest sanctions against Huawei?
Well, Trump pulled out of the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and the Chinese looked around and said, well, that means we're the only ones left, so they can take over Asia now. Maybe that's what Mr. Trump is thinking, make America great, but it is doing a lot to make China great because now they don't have any major rivals in Asia and the Pacific. That's terrific.
Yeah, but you've been talking for years about the end of the dollar, or perhaps the end of the dollar as a reserve currency. Do you think China will be seeing this and their developments of the AIIB Bank as they try and promote that as presaging the end of the dollar?
Well, as you well know, several countries in the world are looking for a replacement, or at least a competitor for the U.S. dollar. It is starting to happen. There are the banks that the Chinese and others have developed to compete with the U.S. dollar, and it's happening. I mean, when the pound sterling lost its status, it didn't happen in a year, it didn't happen in a decade, but it happened, and the same thing is starting to happen with the U.S. dollar.
I know you've been saying it for a while. Lots of people have been saying it for a while, and you just put your historian hat on there, saying, mentioning the British Empire. Why has it taken so long for countries like Russia, China, Iran to start using currency swaps in rubles and renminbis?
First of all, there's no infrastructure. If you call up your bank and say, I want to do something else, the bank doesn't know what to do nearly everywhere in the world, including America, including in Iran. So it takes a while for people to start thinking about it. It takes a while for people to actually learn how to do it. And it takes a while for people to do it. Eventually, everybody does it as second nature. They know that it's better off, or it's an easy thing to do. But right now, I know most places in the world, if you say foreign currency, everybody says U.S. dollars. That's the problem. I mean, that's why the people and the competitors are now trying to arise, because they gave the U.S. dollar and the U.S. government too much power.
I don't know whether you run into Christine Lagarde recently, the famously previously convicted of corruption in a French court, head of the IMF. But, I mean, when you meet people like that, they don't seem nearly as concerned as you do, and they seem relatively sanguine about the world order and the world financial architecture. The
bureaucrats, the way you make it in that world is you rouse up through academia or bureaucracy, and you do what you're supposed to do. You do what everybody else does. You accept the conventional wisdom. Then all of a sudden you look around and the whole world has changed, and you don't know what happened. For goodness sakes, if you're getting your advice from government bureaucrats and politicians and academics, oh my goodness, you're going to have real problems.
I'm not sure how many countries the United States currently sanctions, but do you really think the United States might sanction Turkey, NATO ally Turkey, because it's now threatening Turkey after it's obviously been threatening recently more on Venezuela, on Iran, on who knows who else?
As you look around in the past 2 or 3 years, especially the last 2 or 3 years, America keeps doing contradictory things. One day they say X, and the next day they say Y. And I'm not sure anybody in Washington has a central focus on what's going on. Mr. Trump doesn't seem to, and I don't know who else does. You see it recently in the Middle East. They started attacking Qatar. Well, Qatar is one of our largest military bases. And Trump and the people in Washington were bad-mouthing Qatar right, left, and center. I mean, finally somebody pulled Mr. Trump aside and said, wait a minute, you know one of our largest military bases is there. Let's calm this down.
Do you think, ironically, as well, the American people seem to understand some of the things you've been saying for so many years? Because the word socialism is now in parlance, and people like Sanders talking about mass infrastructure projects, probably a bit like China, who knows, as the only way to stop the kind of financial meltdown you've been predicting since 2008?
We're going to have another one, even though the central bank in America says we won't. And what I said is that the next one's going to be the worst in my lifetime. I don't know when it's going to be. I guess you should watch RT to find out when. But, you know, in 2008, we had a problem because of too much debt. Well, since then, Ashton, The debt has skyrocketed everywhere. Even China has a lot of debt now. So no, we're certainly going to have another one, and it's going to be the worst in my lifetime.
Now, I know you're out there for all those big investors, but we have here British Steel going bust in this country, and so many of the names famous for the privatizations ever since the 1980s in this country, and Mrs. Thatcher. What would you suggest a government like Britain's to do? To begin nationalizing now ahead of any big meltdown like the one you're talking about?
No, nationalization has never been good for anybody. Do you think the post office is a paragon of efficiency? Do you think any country?
They privatized the post office here, I have to tell you. It's just the United States you've got a national one.
Well, oh, that's right. They did privatize the post office there. So I hope it's better now. I don't know. Most government
there are
agencies,
rumors the British post office, newly privatized, is also in financial trouble.
Then maybe somebody should take it. Maybe they should take over the American post office and try to fix ours. Ours is certainly not very efficient. Nationalization, in my view, we tried socialism, we tried communism, we tried it in many, many places, many, many times. It has not worked. Maybe it will work the next time we try it, but human nature is such that it's not going to work.
Huawei are responding to this latest U.S. Google attack by saying they're going to start vertical integration in their own operating system. Some people saying soon, relatively soon, China won't be able to supply its own market, let alone international markets. Do you see policymakers understanding what's going on in that part of the world that you invest so much in?
Well, I will certainly say that sanctions have never worked. They've always hurt people in the end. For instance, right now, every morning, Russian farmers wake up and say, "Thank you, Mr. Trump." He put sanctions on Russian farmers. Russian agriculture is booming because of the sanctions. What unfortunately is going to happen is the Chinese are going to become self-sufficient in many things, which means that many American companies are going to lose their markets. You say that the Chinese will not be able to produce everything. Well, I'm skeptical of that statement because there are 1,300,000,000 Chinese. They produce 10 times as many engineers every year as America does. Some of them are bad engineers, but some of them have got to be good. So I think this is going to rebound and hurt America rather than help us.
Just finally, thanks for the advert for RT, but of course, a lot of viewers of RT and around the world tend to blame George Soros, and I know you work closely with him. What do you think about these attacks on single individuals instead of entire structures when it comes to neoliberalism and the fight back against neoliberalism?
Well, first, Ashwin, that was 40 years ago. You might as well ask me about my first wife. I have no idea what Mr. Soros is doing, nor do I care. But certainly, most argumentum ad hominem have never been good. If you cannot come up with a logical, rational argument on your own, you start attacking people. That's never been a good sign. In fact, when I was a kid in a university, we used to say, if you start resorting to argumentum ad hominem, that means you've lost the argument.
Jim Rogers, thank you.